air's just going to go where you want it to magically. But those little smart arrows that you see on a page in Fine Homebuilding aren't necessarily the way that the air actually goes.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
we put a lot of thought into those arrows. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by GBA Senior Editor Kylie Jacques.
Hello.
Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Girton.
Morning.
And our Senior Producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, good morning, y'all. It's great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Patrick, and others.
Kylie, you were saying that you've been enjoying gardening with the warmer weather we've been having.
Yeah, I'm at my folks' place, and I feel so useful because they have a serious drainage, bulk water management issue happening at the end of the drive that apparently the neighbors call Lake Stone. So it's got a reputation, and I'm fixing it, and it's really exciting. I convinced them to take out some significant hemlocks that were dying or dead. They were all a real hazard over the drive. I know, because that's where I had to park. And also this awful flooding that the town had something to do with. I have not gotten the whole story, but essentially they put in this asphalt berm that is contributing to this awful pooling of water situation. So I've gotten out there. I got the hemlocks down. I've got these beautiful stumps to play with, and they are going to be part of my drainage solution, which on Sunday we had downpours, and I was able to see exactly what was happening and where the water needed to go. And I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug, and I watched the miracle of water management happen. I feel so good about it. It's going to be a significant trough, and it's going to be a little riverbed. Essentially, I'm
a rain garden, right?
Yeah, you can call it. It's funny you say that because I've thought, is it a French drain? Is it a dry? What's dry well? Is it am I creating a rain garden, a rock bed? Who cares what it is? It works. I'm filling it with stone as I find, because it's a New England property in Massachusetts. So I'm finding fields. I'm doing other projects that feed that project, because as you dig for this, you find stone, and I can fill that. And it's incredibly gratifying. I love bulk water management, whether it be building or landscape. It is a really important thing to get right.
Forgive me for observing, but I've never heard anyone call stumps beautiful. What do you intend to do with them?
Well, you have to make them beautiful. First, you get rid of the orange spray paint, however you choose to do that. My method was hand saw. Then you turn them into a sculptural element, and now I'm diverting water around them and filling them with fieldstone, and they're starting to take on, and then I put the oak leaf hydrangea and the vinca and low maintenance. My parents are old. I'm thinking about it over time. I want a safe, bird-friendly, water-smart, resource-smart planting that they can maneuver their cars around, It's a thoughtful project. I'm really enjoying it.
So have your neighbors been supportive of your efforts thus far? Have they come out to see what you're doing? I'm sure they have.
Yeah. Andy, he's my woodworking friend next door. Yeah, he comes over. He's like a grandfatherly type, and he's like, you got to lime the lawn. And so that's on the list. Yeah, he's got the spreader. I went and got the lime. So yeah.
How long do you expect those stumps to last as part of the landscape before they disappear?
Exactly. So
right away.
They're not like important to what I'm doing. But I was thinking about how I'm diverting the water around their root zone. I mean, like literally the water is going to be sitting up against the stumps. Actually, there's 5 of them, and they make their space such it's going to be pretty for a bit. But that will rot them out more quickly, which is a good thing. Then you just mulch them up. Bum. Mm-hmm. No loss, no gain. The trees are gone. That was the thing.
You have not had to do any bulk water management on your landscaping, Mike.
Well, as Kylie's talking, everything that you're talking about are things that I have to do in Arizona at my house in Tucson, because even though you think of the desert Southwest as being water-free, it's not. In the summer, they get monsoons, which are basically big downpours. And Because of that, they get torrential rain in a short period of time in soil that doesn't absorb the water very well. So they have washes. So
Okay.
basically, a little gullies that we would think of in the Northeast, maybe, or little ditches, and the water flows down them, and you have to treat them with respect. And I was talking with my neighbor 2 days ago because they say, "Oh, we have a wash between our two properties, and we have to address all of the brush and the other accumulated like piles of sand that have developed there." Because what happens is when they get blocked, then the water will create its own channel
Yeah.
to the left or the right. And one channel that started this in a small storm we had in February dumped a bunch of water into his backyard on his patio. So,
I
yeah,
can I can
it's
picture that
that
perfectly.
the
Yep.
runoff. Really, what we're talking about is runoff
Yeah.
water
Right.
from surfaces that are either
Impenetrable.
driveways or
Yeah.
streets, or in our case out here, the hard soil.
Uh,
So, yeah.
yeah.
So the fix
Yep.
is to get your loader backhoe, Mike, and pull this stuff out of there. How's that work?
I wish I had a loader backup. I've been searching on aftermarket reset, people looking to find one. But my no, my neighbor has a small machine, so we'll go attack that this coming winter when things cool down again. Back December, January.
Cool. Yep. That's important stuff.
Kylie, you mentioned the heavy rain on Sunday. We got an inch and a half, and
Yeah.
boy, that's a way to tell how your landscape does in
Yeah.
a downpour. Jeff, did you get that downpour too in your
Oh yeah,
area?
yeah,
Yeah.
lots of rain. Yep.
And have you been working on your landscape too?
No, pretty much worked inside over the weekend because now is the time to work in the attic because it's
Oh,
not too hot, not too cold.
yeah. Yeah.
Your
What do
air
you do?
sealing?
Yeah.
No, actually, this is because we've got an attic over the garage, and it's storage, so
Oh,
it's just organizing a lot of Robin's stuff. And
Do you have a pull downstairs to access that space? Is that useful?
no, actually, it's walkout. It's right outside my door here.
oh.
Nice.
What about you,
Well,
Patrick? What have you been up to?
Sunday again, I've been torturing myself with sanding my concrete floor. I did 80 and 100 grit, and that went much faster than the 60 I started with. But it's sufficiently smooth now to take a wax finish. At Jeff's recommendation, I checked the product offerings at Home Depot and found Echo Labs wax floor finish that's
Cool.
designed for concrete without a sealing layer. And I think it's going to take more than one coat, Jeff, but I think it's going to be the perfect thing for what I'm doing.
Can you
Yeah.
describe the application process to me?
Oh yeah, gladly. So the best part of this whole thing is I got to buy a down pressing mop wringer from Amazon. And if you know anything about mop wringers, and I hope you don't,
I don't.
this is the better kind. It's got a
Okay.
pair of little arms that squish the mop into the wringer and get the soapy water, or in this
Gotcha,
case,
gotcha.
floor finish out of it, and then you just put it on with a rag mop. Carol said, "How do you prevent getting it all over the walls and stuff?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, you just gotta be careful. It'll,
Well, probably when you get to within a couple inches of the walls, you got to get down on your hand and do it by hand.
probably with a rag or something, right?"
Yeah, you're not going to be flipping the mop against the wall. You're going to stop short of the wall, right?
I hope so,
Hopefully.
Kylie. This is all uncharted territory.
Now I know with paint, when you're painting, you got to keep a wet edge as you do application. What about with putting down a wax like that? Do you have
It,
to,
it
if you're
goes
doing a
pretty
big
fast,
area?
Mike.
Okay,
Once
so you don't have to
because
worry
you're
about.
loading this pretty absorbent thing up, a rag mop with
Mhm.
finish, and it holds a lot, and it takes hours to dry, so I don't think that's an issue.
Mm.
It's funny. I used to do this work when I was in high school working for the school district. We would, they would hire summer students or hire students for the summer to work on floor maintenance. These were VCT floors that we would strip with chemical stripper using a scrubbing machine, and then wax them much like the way I just described with, I think it was Hillman floor finish. And I'm sure the smell of this stuff is going to bring back painful memories of doing this for hours on end.
Yeah. My experience with a mop has to do with milk at Starbucks, not fun stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
How much milk
Lot
are
of
you
milk.
Yeah.
Lot of milk.
oh.
Lot of milk.
Well, once again, if y'all want to offer some advice on how to do this or tell me not to, you better hurry because I'm on a path.
It sounds wonderful. I look forward to seeing you got to share a photograph when it's done, Patrick.
I will. I meant to take a photo this morning, but frankly, I forgot. It looks so much better, Kylie.
Yeah.
Instead of like a dirty concrete floor, it looks
Sure.
like a nice white,
finished
clean
floor.
one.
Yeah.
And it has enough
it
patina
will.
that it's not boring. So
Okay. Yeah. I know. There's something to be said. I love me a polished slab. I really do. I think it's a really nice look. And there's something very clean and nice feeling about it.
on the subject, I'm working on a feature article for Fine Homebuilding magazine written by Andy Grace about doing the slick finish on his post-frame buildings concrete floor. And that should be coming in a future issue of Fine Homebuilding soon. And it's quite the process, an amazing floor, super durable, relatively low cost. Lot to like about it, right, Kylie?
Yeah.
What do you like about it?
I like the feeling of my feet, quite frankly. I mean, as somebody who enjoys movement, it's just a nice feeling. Treading back and forth on a floor like that just feels good.
Feels great on the convention center floor, right, Mike?
4 or 5 days on a convention
I know.
center
Well, it's not
floor.
the best for you. That's for sure. That's for sure. It's not the best for
How do you deal with that, Mike? Do you wear boots? What do you do?
I wear hiking boots, and I've over the years have found that a couple of pairs that I regularly use give enough cushion. I don't know how people work in factories or big box stores or anywhere where you're working on
suffer.
concrete all the time.
They suffer.
People who I talk to builders, and they're who always they want to oversize their joists. They want really stiff floors. And I'm thinking, you really want just a little bit of give in a floor when you walk. It's so much more comfortable for people, and it's imperceivable, the deflection, yet it absorbs enough of the impact as you're walking around your house that your legs don't get tired like they do walking on concrete.
So true.
Well, that's really interesting. I have never heard anyone observe that, a slightly bouncy floor could be better for your joints and bod. So that's interesting.
Absolutely. That's why dance studios have, what are they called, Mike? Suspended floors or something.
They do something. Right? They
do
build it up
to
a little bit. Yeah.
Create the bounce. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. This comes from our friend Doug in Colorado. Hey, y'all. On episode 555 after show, Patrick made a statement that I think should be repeated often. Well, of course, I'm going to say that at any opportunity.
I was like, whoa, what is this?
When nearing the end of a build and money is getting tight, spend more in the areas that are hard to change later. It's an easy job to change a $20 light fixture, much more difficult to replace a costly bathtub. Even laminate countertops can be replaced with quartz or stone without much additional cost for the removal. With plumbing fixtures, also think long and hard before going with the latest decorator colors. If you go into a bathroom and see harvest gold or avocado fixtures, you know when the house was built. White may be boring, but it never goes out of style. Doug. Well, thanks for the kind words, Doug. I kind of like the diversity of bath fixture colors. I don't know. White is kind of boring, but I don't know if I would ever be gutsy enough to choose something other than white.
Yeah, a lot of these colors, it's funny how they go in and out of style. Even avocado and the sunflower yellow, they've gone in and out of style at least 3 times in my career.
I'm a big fan of the accent wall. Then it's just one wall. You've got your statement, you've got your appropriate color for the times, and then you just paint it over. Boom.
And then you have something to decorate with too, like coordinating, towels or whatever, right?
Yes, exactly. You've got a theme. And you've got a nice created space, and it doesn't take much. I do an accent. That's almost the first thing I do every time I move into a place. I'm like, which one's the accent wall?
And it's so easy to change.
It's paint. So easy. Yeah. It's like,
I gotta admit though, I get a certain warm feeling when I go into a bathroom with fixtures that are that dusty rose color. I think that's pretty awesome.
There is a feeling. I'll grant you that much. There's a feeling.
Eisenhower bathroom. This comes from Kyle. I was just writing in regards to the discussion about induction versus gas cooking. I just listened to the newest E3 Energy and Efficiency with Emily Mottram podcast, season 5, episode 3, where she interviewed a professional chef that is also a kitchen technology educator. Boy, that's a pairing, huh?
I know, that's so cool. I love that.
They had a great discussion about this topic. What I found interesting is that even the expert pointed out that the professional versus residential gas ranges are completely different ballparks in BTU output, and that an induction cooktop puts out more energy to your pan than a residential gas range cooktop. It's also 90% efficient versus 40% for gas. Going from my induction range at our old home to our new home with a beautiful 36-inch gas range installed already has me missing induction cooking so much. The ease of cleaning isn't even comparable, as well as the ease of boiling water and adjusting the temperature while cooking. The downside to induction could be seen as having to have proper cookware, but most high-quality cookware I have found work well with induction. I also enjoy how much more safe I feel cooking with my 3-year-old son on the induction versus our new gas range. The gas range is also having me search for a 36-inch freestanding induction range to replace it. However, they seem very costly, especially since our current range is less than 1 year old. Just thought people might enjoy the listen. Kyle. I always appreciate first-person, reports on things in their homes. So anytime y'all who are out there, please feel free to write in with your experience.
I'm sold on induction cooking too, and that's new to me. There's this little hot plate. I got something that Martin Holliday had reviewed and recommended because he was interested in testing induction cooktops. And so I went with that recommendation and I bought it. I'm just so thrilled with it. It's what he mentions, the how quickly water boils and how easy it is to clean and just the ease and the safety features of it. It's like, it didn't even cost that much. I feel like if it were to quit tomorrow, I've already gotten my money's worth, and I bought it 2 months ago. It's like, it's unfortunate it has to be such an expensive addition to your kitchen.
I can't imagine that's going to be the case forever, Kylie.
I don't think so either. I think it's going to catch up.
As it gets more mainstream, it's going to come down.
So when will that be? Because I like to cook. My wife likes to cook, and I've always cooked on gas since I was a little kid. And I even put a propane system in my house and been cooking on propane for years, for the last 25 years. And with all the talk what we've had on the podcast over the last few months about the issues that you brought up, Patrick, with the particulates coming off of gas cooktops, and even though I have a 400 CFM range hood, I'm thinking, there's got to be spillage coming around the edges. And I'm thinking maybe I'm just going to bite the bullet and wire up and put in an induction. But they are expensive for the full range set. Yeah.
Have you priced them out? I have never priced them. What do they go for? I just know they're expensive. What can you tell us that you found?
Well, I haven't looked at the ranges for my house. I've looked at the cooktops because at my house in Tucson, it has a electric, just a drop-in cooktop. And those are running, I can get a decent one for around $700 to $900 in that range. They go up from there, of course.
Sure.
I'm not sure on the ranges, but I'm guessing they'd be
$1,000.
1,000 to
I think
more.
it's 1,000. Jeff, do you have any experience with this subject?
I do not, no.
Yeah.
Hey, if I could, I would invest in that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Gas.
Pardon?
I want gas.
You like gas?
I miss my gas range.
I used to miss mine. I don't miss it anymore now that I've seen the light.
This comes from Jim in Cleveland. FHB podcast, the topic of mini splits came up on the Pro Talk episode 544 with Maria Lauber from Mitsubishi Train HVAC. It was a great listen. I thought it would weigh in regarding a complete 180 we did on the HVAC system selection on our new build. You were kind enough to include my letter about the Forever House my wife and I are finishing up, and we have trademarked the term best guessery on the behalf of the FHB podcast team.
I don't
know who used best guessery. Does anyone remember?
I don't know. It sounds like something you'd say, though. I'll say that.
We originally were going to use mini splits, but ended up going with very small furnaces with 1.5 ton condensers. While VFR technology behind the mini split design is indeed magic, there are a few points that should be considered in balance with the design decision to use the system of the type we chose. One, fresh air exchange. The wall and ceiling cassette design obviously eliminates the ability to incorporate the home's ERV fresh air return into the airflow of a ducted furnace. So that means that the ERV will typically be supplying fresh air only to a single point or two, rather than the many registers that your furnace is supplying. So pick your location wisely. Number two, humidification. Similar to the ERV challenge, if you think your system design will need the support of an evaporative or steam humidifier, then you again don't have the advantage of a network of ductwork to distribute the conditioned air. Three, thermostats. Mini splits come with a proprietary thermostat that, while very nice, preclude you from swapping it out with your favorite aftermarket smartphone-enabled thermostat like Nest. Mitsubishi does make an interface box that accepts common 24-volt HVAC thermostats controls on one side and then translates that to their proprietary controls on the other. But you'll lose some fine control doing this, like more granular fan speeds. Finally, service life and cost. Mini splits are incredibly sophisticated pieces of engineering. When they work, they are great, but when they break, the component cost can be huge. At my company, I've had some control boards and mini splits that have cost well over $1,200 to replace. Then there is the matter of how long any manufacturer will continue to produce these parts. The mechanical engineer who helped me design the system on our home pointed out that a Goodman furnace has a control board that is readily available for $250 and is the same one that is produced for several manufacturers, and any low-level mirror fogging technician can replace the part. Mini splits require a higher level service technician in my experience. Yeah, these are all things I've said on the show. I totally agree.
Yeah, it's a nice
Now,
list, though.
the first point that Jim makes on the fresh air exchange and coupling in an ERV with the ductwork of a furnace, a fully ducted system. I've read in a number of places, including GBA, where
Yeah.
it's not a great idea to try to dump an ERV or HRV ventilation, incoming fresh air into your
Existing HVAC.
existing ductwork,
Yeah.
thinking that the air is going to be distributed evenly just because the ducts are so much bigger and the ERV is running at such a low speed and not pushing much air. And then you get either pressure differentials when the air handle is running, or if it's not running, then the air is just kind of dumping into the closest return or supply duct because it doesn't necessarily go the direction you think it's going to go. So that's one thing, caution. I just want to point out that might
I've
be.
heard the same thing. And I've
Yeah.
also heard if you have a standalone central dehumidifier, using the regular ductwork to distribute that dehumidified air in the shoulder seasons can be ineffective also for the same reasons.
Yeah,
But people do this because it's way less expensive, and I think oftentimes it works well enough.
But they're not getting the performance that they think
Right.
they're getting.
They
A
should
lot of
just know
people,
that.
and I've been. You can accuse me of this, where something seems logical when you think of it initially. Where, oh yeah, we'll just dump the air into the ductwork. The air is just going to go where you want it to magically. But those little smart arrows that you see on a page in Fine Homebuilding aren't necessarily the way that the air actually goes
What
when
are you
you start.
talking about?
Yeah, we
We
call
put a
them
lot of
smart
thought into those
arrows
arrows.
because they're
I can
intelligent.
I can hear Allison Bales chiming in here,
Yeah.
saying that dedicated ductwork for ventilation and dehumidification are essential.
It's
It's just
always preferred, right? I think it's fair
are
to say
always
that.
And
preferred. Okay.
And it
Yeah.
gets right back to our first comment today, where where Doug mentioned, it's the finishes that you can change later that you might want to save some money on. You downgrade those and upgrade them later. When you're getting to HVAC and other utility things, spend the money up front, do it right. It's going to last a long time and perform better. So anyway,
That's great advice.
I'll get off my.
No, I think that's wise
No, it's-
advice.
yeah, I
And
think
I
we
would
should
say the
do
same
it.
thing about wells and septic
Yeah.
systems and all that stuff that
Mhm.
is really
Yes.
hard and expensive to fix
Yes.
later.
And if you don't get it right and things go a wire, it's like a nightmare. It ruins your life. I'm here to say. So,
Yeah.
there's that too. just the hassle.
You mean the quality of life issue with stuff that doesn't work?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you
Totally
just gotta
agree.
factor that in. Like, how much time do you want to spend on things that aren't working properly? You know?
Or spend time thinking about it, right, Kylie?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So Kurt, I am really sorry. Last week we intended to talk about your Seattle crawl space, but we ran out of time. And here we are. I'm going to read your long letter. And I apologize greatly that we didn't get to it last week, but it did seem worthy of more discussion than we could have given it. So here we go, team. Hi, podcast crew. I've been an avid listener for years and really appreciate the expertise and information in the podcast. I've learned a ton. I haven't heard this one discussed before, so I thought I'd ask for some advice. I live in a 1905 two-story, 1,900 square foot house in Seattle, Washington, climate zone 4C. I love that our listeners know what climate zone there is.
Yeah,
This is fantastic.
specifically C. I didn't know that, but I lived there for 12 years. Yeah.
It hasn't seen any major improvements in its life apart from new electrical, plumbing, and some air sealing and attic insulation. It has blown in cellulose to R49. Most of the house sits on a 24 to 20 inch tall cripple wall with no bracing. The mechanicals include a 95% efficiency gas furnace, electric hot water heater, and they're in a Michigan basis that is open to the rest of the crawl space. The exterior finish is stucco over lath, some of which is failing due to weather exposure, lack of maintenance, and probably some settling. The remainder of the floor joists sit directly on the foundation. Okay, Michigan basement,
Yeah.
for those who are unfamiliar, is, I'm pretty sure, just a basement that's not full height. It is like, 6 feet or 7 feet versus 8 or 9.
Why do you think it would be called that, though? That's the interesting
Michigan
part.
residents are typically short, Kylie.
That's funny.
Oh,
I don't know why. Given the as-built site condition, does it make sense to do the seismic work from the exterior, demo the stucco and lath, add the required blocking and tie-downs, bolt the sill to the foundation, and add plywood or zip sheathing? It seems like this would meet the seismic retrofit requirements and start to improve the building envelope. The benefit is a relatively easy working area, but I'm not quite sure how to detail where the zip would meet the bottom of the lap siding and what finish material to put over the zip to match the existing foundation pattern. Finally, I'd insulate the cripple wall stud bays with mineral wool from the inside before encapsulating the basement. Moving materials is infinitely easier and the pace of work would be a lot faster. My back thinks this is a good approach. Alternately, I could work from inside the crawl space. The access isn't great, but it is tolerable. The strategy is basically the same, except the air barrier changes significantly. The standard advice is to bolt, block, and sheathe with half-inch plywood with vent holes. How can I effectively encapsulate the crawl space with this system? The crawl space floor poly can't run up the plywood and cover the vents, right? I can't put foam board under the floor joist since there's plumbing and HVAC in the way. I guess the only upside I see is that I could work down there in a rainy season and stay dry. With either method, I plan to add a vapor barrier to the crawl space floor and tape it appropriately to the sill and around a few posts, even though there is a poorly done air barrier already. While I'm down there, should I level the crawl space and add a couple inches of foam below the vapor barrier, pour a rat slab, radiant slab, something else? The main level flooring is about due for a replacement, so I could possibly add a membrane air barrier to the subfloor when I remove those, but that doesn't seem ideal and might cause condensation on the floor joist below. I'm not a builder by trade, rather I'm a mountain guide. I'm not afraid of hard work and difficult spots, but would love to make this as easy as possible on myself. We plan to live in this house for a very long time, and I'm willing to put in the effort to do it correctly. Okay, folks, this is a tough one because we have mechanical systems in this crawl space. It's not really conditioned, it's not unconditioned, it's one of these in-between spaces that are always problematic. Mike, I'm going to let you go first because I think this is a lot to chew on, and I need a break.
well, yeah, where to start? I'm not. I've been out in Seattle. I've gone by and looked at what contractors do when they're doing these seismic retrofits. So I can't speak professionally to what is going to work there. So I'm presuming that Kurt has it down when he says that putting the zip sheathing and anchoring the plates down, the mud sill down better is going to be sufficient. I'm going to think that working from the outside is going to be easier than trying to do all the work from the inside. As far as those transitions from whatever if you're gonna put sheathing on the outside and do that transition that you're concerned about to the lap siding and giving some sort of appearance of that stucco finish, you theoretically could put stucco back on the outside, but that might be a pain. But you might look into some of the fiber cement panel
Mm.
boards or something like that. That's going to give you that effect of a difference in the siding. As far as where that transition is, if you can get flashing up underneath the existing lap siding and then put a transition board like a skirt board or something, if that's in keeping with the house as far as the exterior, so that you have a distinct break between the lap siding and whatever you put down below. Maybe even some vertical board and batten style appearance boards, something that can accept the that looks appropriate. It looked like in the photographs that there was insulation already in the joist bays.
And it was
So
gross. It was clearly not doing a job except for filtering dirty air, right?
Mm.
And exactly. So he didn't mention what he's going to do about that. And if you're going to go to the trouble of putting the insulation down on the floor, well, I guess the decision there is, where is your thermal barrier going to be? Is it going to be at the floor level, or is it going to be at the crawl space level, and then at the floor, and then the walls of the crawl space, and then
Isn't
take
isn't
it
that
to the next step?
isn't that true of the vapor barrier too, Mike? Like he made mention of, like, why would you ever put poly down on the floor and walls and then also put a vapor barrier at the floor assembly? That doesn't
Yep.
make sense, does it?
No,
Right.
and I think if you do nothing, you got to put a good vapor retarder on the floor.
Retarder, yes, that's
You know that vapor barrier poly, and
yeah,
I think that's going to stop a lot of moisture migration into the floor
right.
system, which is gonna, if you're going to put a new floor down, you certainly want to control the vapor drive before you put new hardwood down over this, constantly moisture producing dirt floor in the crawl space.
Hmm.
And then that kind of ties in with whether or not you have any ventilation air going in. Because if you're going to put in, especially in a humid climate like in Seattle, if you're going to put a good poly vapor barrier to keep the moisture from coming through the earth into that crawl space, with the intention of that maintaining or reducing the moisture that's going to make its way up into through the floor, then you don't ever want to have vents into that, because you're going to defeat the purpose of it, I
Right.
think.
It's like putting a dehumidifier in a vented basement.
Right.
Yeah.
You're dehumidifying the outdoors,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Town. Same principle in a sense.
I wanted to make sure Kurt had and he mentioned in his email that he had a 95% efficiency gas furnace, which typically means that the combustion air is coming from outside, or it might always mean that. But I wanted clarification. And if you seal up your crawl space, you want to make sure you got your combustion air and you're not going to deprive the combustion appliance of air. Otherwise, it's going to pull it from upstairs or backdraft. So we don't want these things to happen. So he doesn't need to have it combustion air provided to his gas appliance.
Patrick,
Go ahead.
You're saying that makes me wonder, like, when you are a homeowner who decides to encapsulate your crawl space and your mechanicals are down there, does that immediately mean like it's time to get a building official in there and get permitting? Because that's a matter of life and death, isn't it? If you've got combustion happening in an unvented encapsulated space. It could be, right?
It
That
could
could be
be.
very
It
dangerous.
absolutely could be.
And
Um,
don't expect that if when you pull a permit for this type of work, or when you get a permit, and it's going to depend on jurisdictions and whether or not you have to. If you go straight by the model code, anytime you install any insulation anywhere,
Mhm.
you're required to get a permit. But again,
I
different
didn't know that.
departments, different jurisdictions, different methods, different applications. But if you do get a permit, even if they're going to come out to inspect for the insulation, the seismic retrofit, the putting down poly, any of that, that doesn't automatically trigger that they're going to be looking at the mechanicals.
Mm.
So they're not a fail-safe check on your life safety with regard to combustion air and whether or not your furnace is going to operate properly. That's really it falls outside of that, I think.
Who do you get to come in for that, Mike? How do you make that happen?
That's when you want your HVAC contract.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, especially with gas systems, they don't have service contracts and regular checkups of their system.
Mm.
When you have an oil-based system, frequently you do, because if you don't have your oil burner or oil furnace or your oil boiler checked at least on an annual basis, you can get a lot of incrustation in the exchanger, and then it's not firing properly, or the burner's not firing. A lot of gas systems will run for years,
Decades.
decades, not proper, not inefficient, not properly,
That
with
nobody
cobwebs all
knows.
through them, with cracked heat exchangers, and nobody knows about it.
Uh-huh.
It's ideal to have it checked every year, or at least every other year, for safety and for efficiency.
Uh-huh.
It's a few $100s, and it's money well spent. But that's sort of a sidebar to the main thing. But
Right.
your point's right, Patrick, that we have to know what that equipment is, because any of that air sealing that you're going to do in that crawl space, because if you're going to take it from the floor and bring the air barrier up the wall, especially if you're putting zip on and you're going to tape it, now you're creating a really airtight
Right.
cavity down there that wasn't airtight before necessarily.
That's the risk. And,
Yeah.
Kurt, I don't know what I would do. I'd be tempted to work on the outside too, because
Yeah.
you need the good sheathing. The plaster and lath is not going to prevent your house from shaking those cripple walls flat in a good earthquake. So I think you got to solve that problem. You live in a mild climate, so I don't know how deep I'd go into the deep energy retrofit measures. Like, I don't think foam insulation on the soil makes sense in your climate. I would totally insulate the above grade pony walls, because that's a huge heat loss area, and it's going to make your floors way more comfortable, I suspect. And I would totally put the poly on the floor in any case, and detail that correctly, because you want to stop that vapor drive.
And what you want to do is make sure, if you're going to put that poly down, to get a good seal to, and this is going to be the tricky part, to to get it continuity to the zip, and at the bottom edge of the zip where it's hitting the mud sill, you're going to want a good seal. So it's kind of getting any spot where air can flow in and out. That's going to help control your vapor.
Patrick,
Go ahead.
the article that you referenced, is it what was the title of it again?
Home energy diet for an old Victorian.
Yeah. That's such a great visual aid to seeing what encapsulating the space could look like.
It's got some of the best smart arrows we've ever done.
Yeah.
No, I'm very proud of that piece. If you guys look at the photography, you might figure out why. I was in some pretty horrible places taking pictures of some very important work, complete with rat skeletons even.
Yes.
So it talks a lot about a project like you have, Kurt, where you have this in-between space in an old house, and it's how to detail it so it works a lot better. So check out this article, if nothing else, because it at least gives you some context of what you're trying to do. And I think if you have that, you're going to know how to do it yourself.
And there's something so slightly interesting about that place, is that they had 2 porches. So I don't know what Kurt's house entails, but something to consider is the idea that you have shared crawl space between an exterior porch and living space, and
they made like little walls to separate.
They made little walls out of rigid foam. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Great case study.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about this is a good DIY project, because you can think about it as the crawl space walls are not going to be really tall. And you can do like the east side and knock that out in, a couple of weekends. Then you can move to the west side wall, the south side, and you can work your way around the sides of the building without having to tear the whole thing down and do it all at once.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And I'm going to leave you with the words of this author of this feature article we're talking about, Jeff Tooley, who is the contractor who did this work in this project. And he said, it doesn't have to be pretty, it has to be continuous. And if you look at it with that lens, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. Boy, continuity in the old houses, that seems to be the biggest struggle, right? The biggest challenge.
You nailed it, Kylie. That is totally true.
It makes sense, because there's so much settling and crookedness.
And in between spaces,
Hmm.
like there's
Oddball
especially
spots.
like on a
Yeah.
bungalow, it's a
Yeah.
complicated form,
Yeah.
and the air barrier was not a consideration when it was built. I can tell you.
Well, even crawl spaces alone, when they were built, it seems like they're always so sort of junky, right? I mean, it's like it's not the best construction effort.
No, it was because
Nobody
that's
cared because
you
nobody was
didn't
going
go
to look
down
at
there,
it.
right?
You're right.
Yeah.
Hey, before you jump into the next question, do we have an after show topic planned?
Oh yeah, thanks, Mike.
Windows.
Yeah, Windows. We're gonna talk
Windows.
about Windows.
Okay, good.
And this was motivated by a piece that we saw on GBA, right? Kylie, do you want to mention that
Yeah.
one?
Yes, Lloyd Alter wrote a piece about the sizing of windows. He's a former architect and developer and is now an environmental journalist. He writes for GBA and he was on Tree Hugger for a long, long time and has his own blog. But anyway, he's very uh, he has a lot of strong opinions about design, and they're so smart, and they fit right in with the pretty good house model, if you think about it that way. And just the whole idea of passive house window sizing, or excuse me, that's an aside. The sizing of windows, that's the topic.
And Mike, you were all
I don't want
excited
to get
because
into it.
you've had a change of philosophy on this very subject. Am I right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get into
So we'll get
that.
into that.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know what it is about Windows, but when you talk about a new build with somebody, inevitably the question of what windows are you getting, what do they cost, comes up right away, right, Mike?
Mhm.
Why is that?
Yeah, the windows are from the exterior, they're the most prominent parts. You can whatever the siding you pick, whatever roof you pick, the windows are the next most important. It's windows, siding, and roofing.
I've been
The curb appeal.
I've heard that windows to a house are like eyes to a face.
Mm. Yeah.
Except it wasn't put that way. I just put it that way.
And it was, I'm getting messed it up here, Kylie.
They're important, in a way.
Okay, this comes from Andrew. Hello, FHB team. I'm a carpenter in the Pacific Northwest and I'm redoing the floors of our 1980s tract home before our 3-month-old baby begins to crawl around. After demolishing the old 3/4-inch oak floor and carpet, I was puzzled to find subfloor that appears to be chipboard with a fir outer ply. I've asked around and searched Google, but I've gotten very little to go on. One fella said maybe it's a product called Red-X, but that's all I have to go on. On to the problem, the old floor had no vapor barrier and the house is built on a vented crawl space. There is 6mm poly covering the dirt in the crawl space, but it's not in the best shape. I'd like to run some underlayment as well as a sound vapor barrier prior to installing the 3/8 inch thick engineered birch flooring. I'm concerned about moisture migrating up through the old floor system, condensing on the barrier and then soaking into the chipboard. The joints are very gappy and swollen as it is. I'm also concerned about sanding the high spots for fear of burning through the outer ply and leaving exposed chipboard. I'm hoping that you all can point me in the right direction. Thanks for all you do. I've listened to every single podcast at least once. Andrew, I hope you can get that time back sometime, Andrew.
Yeah, with over
so
500
nice.
episodes,
So
that's a big commitment.
So I'd be worried about this too, especially if the joints are swollen and gappy, Andrew. You need to fix the vapor drive because you don't want to put a new floor on top of this because it'll cup. As the underside takes on the moisture, it's going to make the top side concave. And boy, then the first thing everyone wants to do is sand the high ridges, and then you really got a problem because then the board ends up being not cross-sectional or not rectangular in cross-section. So
This is, a second today. So we're focusing on the Pacific Northwest today.
and crawl spaces,
and
right?
crawl spaces,
crawl
exactly.
spaces,
And floor
right.
systems
So
and vapor barriers, and it seems like the
that's
same
good
question.
though.
All of what we said in the last question
Would be
applies here.
applicable. Yeah. So what I couldn't tease from the way that Andrew posed the point, his system, it said, I would like to run some underlayment as well as a sound vapor barrier prior to installing the engineered flooring. Is he considering putting this? So is it the sound vapor barrier in the crawl space or the vapor retarder that you often put over your subfloor before you put your flooring down? So there's two different
Let's talk about both
layers.
scenarios.
Yes. Okay. Good.
I
Yeah.
worry about putting it on the top
Hmm.
directly under the finished flooring because of the potential vapor drive and this subfloor of undetermined material, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yep. So you don't want a vapor barrier on top of the subfloor before you put your new flooring in, because then any moisture in that crawl space, because it's got a very poorly detailed 6 mil poly down on the, no, it has no
He
vapor,
said,
no vapor
no,
barrier. Okay, he doesn't.
oh, I'm thinking of the last one.
Yeah, I'm getting to two of them
I know, they're very
confused a little
similar.
bit.
They're very
Yeah,
similar.
so this one doesn't. Yeah, so you don't want
There is
the,
6 mil poly covering the
In
dirt in the
bad
crawl
shape,
space,
but
but
it's
it's
right?
not
not in the
in
best
best
Not
shape.
in
shape.
good
Okay,
shape.
Okay.
Right,
so he
right.
does have it. Okay, good. So because you don't have, so that's where the good vapor barrier should be, is on the floor, to prevent the ground moisture from getting into the crawl space area. Another issue could be that, does he mention that he's got a vented crawl space or an unvented crawl space?
I don't,
Because in the Pacific Northwest, depending on where in the Pacific Northwest specifically, it's usually a high moisture area. So if it is a vented crawl space, even if you got the poly on the floor, you can get moisture coming in to that crawl space. So you do want to have some vapor control going up into the house through the floor system. And that's usually where we put down tar paper over your subfloor. But this is where we get into the gray area of, if we put down tar paper, which is your conventional over your
Subfloor.
subfloor before you put your flooring on, is that going to be a problem? I don't think it would be if it's like a 15-pound tar paper, which is usually what we do. But not knowing this, I have a little experience with some of these weird 1980s subfloor sheathings where they were a veneer of plywood and a core of either OSB or
Particle board.
particle board. And it depends. If it was a core of OSB, those were pretty good. But if it was a core of particle board, yeah, I think that might be what Andrew's encountering here, where they do swell up at the edges. Um,
I think
it's
if you're even considering at all taking out this subflooring, now is the time to do it. If you're
Oh.
not, you're going to have to do have to talk to the manufacturer of the finished flooring to make sure it's okay to put it on this material, because I'm guessing it's not ideal.
he doesn't mention whether the engineered birch flooring is a nail down, a floating, or a glue down,
Glue down. Yeah.
because each of those have their own implications for what's required for your subfloor. A floating floor is going to be a little bit more forgiving than a nail or a glue down over a suspect subfloor.
That makes sense.
So
Andrew, I
that's
think you
why.
got to look to the
Wiggle room.
flooring manufacturer for more
Yeah.
guidance on that. And I would tell
Yeah.
you that you should also read A Home Energy Diet for an Old Victorian, because you have many of the same
Yeah,
issues
right.
at work in your
Yes.
place.
Which
And that-
issue is that, Patrick? I guess we'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. 2012. My God,
Yeah,
am I that
2000,
old?
but it's all still.
10 years.
I remember looking at the copyright date too and thinking, well, it all still applies. Science doesn't change. Yeah. Right.
Good building science doesn't seem to change a lot.
That's right.
But yeah, and I agree. If you think about it, even though you're doing a redoing your flooring, Andrew, and you also treat the crawl space in that fashion where you're encapsulating it, you could almost, I won't say solve, but you minimize the chance of having serious problems with the subfloor behaving badly under the engineered flooring.
Yeah. I mean, there's part of me that just feels like if you're going to put the cost and energy into the finished floor, you've better get the subflooring in a
Absolutely right.
state.
Because imagine how intrusive it is on your life to put in a floor once and
Right.
then have to do it again or fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's been performing okay since the 1980s, so it's probably 35 to 40 years old. So hear me out on this. If it's 35 to 40 years old and all you've got is a little swelling at the edges in that climate,
Mhm.
to to remove that subfloor. Now think about all your partition walls are sitting on
Oh
top
no.
of it,
Uh-huh.
all of your cabinets, all
It's
of
a
your other
stupid
rooms.
undertaking.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
It,
Yeah.
crazy.
Got it.
it's a lot to remove and replace. So if you
Mhm.
can spend the time on encapsulating the basement or crawl
Mhm.
space to make
Mhm.
sure that it's not gonna, you're gonna stabilize it where it is.
Where
So
it
if it's
is, yeah.
working, don't mess with it. Just fix the potential problem, which is going to be that moisture from
Weaken it
below,
over time.
and then you can put down flooring and be pretty confident that it's going to keep going for at least another 40 years as it is.
That makes
Jeff, what
sense,
would you
Mike.
do?
I like what Mike says,
Yeah.
but the only thing I would add is monitor it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that's a good idea too.
How do you monitor, once you've got your finished floor on, how do you monitor your subflooring?
Well,
Oh,
no,
you mean a hobo data logger, of
yeah.
course.
A hobo data logger,
Yeah.
right.
or just the moisture in the humidity in the crawl
In
space.
the crawl space.
Yep.
Got it. Yep.
And if you don't have insulation in the joist bays in your crawl space, you can go down there once a year and just with a camera, just look around and see
Uh-huh.
what it looks like. If it
That's such
starts to
good
look like
advice.
it's delaminating, because usually those we call them comply, the veneer on the top and bottom with the core of OSB or particle board, we called it comply, and those had the veneer on the bottom, and you could see if there was any problem because it would start to, the veneer would come loose.
Yeah. I love that addition, Jeff.
Mhm.
Monitoring our
Yeah,
houses. It's
it's
such good advice, and it's like
now
sometimes
it's easy. It didn't used to
now
be
it's much
easy.
easier.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a building scientist to get your head around what's happening in your environment.
Well, our final question comes from Justin. Justin wrote into episode 559 about his failing brick veneer, and we had some advice on that. He had a couple other questions. The one I'm about to read I thought was interesting to other folks who are avid DIYers. And it also ties in with our after show of windows. Because they're a huge expense, Justin writes in, my windows are basically non-functioning, but I do not want to replace them with just cheap replacement units from the box store. I'm a woodworker and furniture maker on the side, and I'm seriously contemplating making my own windows. Am I crazy, or is this something tackleable for someone able to work to very tight tolerances? I'm thinking I want to do wood casements. Any tips or suggestions? Would it be crazy to simply buy the double or triple pane glass panels, install them in custom built casements and frames? I've sourced all the glass. I have a glass manufacturer about 2 miles away from my house and hardware, and think this would be a really fun project to tackle and save me tons of money by not having to pay for labor. Again, am I crazy, or do you think it's doable? I think we've established by now I'm probably crazy.
That made me laugh out loud, literally. I don't use that term lightly.
Go
What
for
do you
it,
think,
Justin.
team?
Yeah, go for it.
I know. I can't help but hear Justin Fink weighing in here. I feel like he would say the same thing. Go for it. Do
Yeah.
it. If you
It's not crazy to make your own windows. My great uncles used to own a small sash and door shop in the 19 teens, 20s, 30s, and back when every community, every few towns would have a sash and door shop. Windows weren't built in these centralized area places that distributed them nationwide. They were built locally,
Mhm.
and of course they were, probably not as well air sealed and all of that. But with if it sounds like Justin's already done the homework, figured out for the hardware, probably figured out for the gaskets, and he's familiar with working in tight tolerances. Just pick your wood. Wood, I'm sure. Pick your wood that's going to be dimensionally stable, and then you can buy those insulated glass units for pretty reasonably, because most of the work in a window isn't the glass, it's all the frames and the sashes and all of that work. So, yeah, do it.
Hey, and think of the carbon savings on this project too. Otherwise, what he'd be importing them from Europe, probably, right? So good
Yeah.
on him.
And
It's like
and I'm going to be doing the
homegrown.
exact same thing when I build my own house in a year or 2 years or 3 years.
You
You're
are?
going to
You're
make
gonna
your
make
own
your own windows?
Yes, and
Oh
we can talk
wow,
about it more in the after show
that's
because,
awesome.
oh, well, I'm not going to do the glazing. I'm going to buy
Yeah,
insulated glass units, and one of the things in Lloyd's article focused on carbon and all of
sure,
that,
sure.
but we can talk in the after show more about it. But one of the things he didn't bring up is the air sealing aspects
Mhm.
of different types of windows and fixed windows. Most of my windows are going to be fixed windows.
Yep.
There's no need in today to really have a lot of operable windows, which is one of the mistakes I made in my current house. So yeah, fixed window. You just put a frame around the a perimeter around the glass unit and put a jamb on it and just insert it in the opening.
That means
And
that
that's
your
something
interior life is really dictated by mechanical ventilation. Yeah.
pretty much you're putting it in ERV or an HRV. And if you've got allergies, you don't want to have a lot of open windows in the
Right.
spring and the early fall when the temperatures, at least in our climate in the Northeast, is most appropriate for opening the doors and windows.
And the best
And
time for allergies, I would point
and the
out.
best time for allergies,
Right.
yes.
Right. Dust
So
and pollen.
yeah, I think
Mhm.
if Justin, when you do the work, send us pictures. I think that could be a really good article too,
Yeah.
Patrick.
Yeah.
Is somebody making their own windows and
Totally.
how to go about that?
So we
I'm
have
going to
never
weigh
done
in
that.
and say Justin is crazy, but I admire his pluck because, this is not something for me. I know that enough about myself at this point in my life that this is not a project for me, but I think it's awesome if you want to do
Yeah.
this. Why not? And
Yeah.
as Mike points out, this used to be standard procedure. Carpenters used to make windows, and, it wasn't everybody, but it was probably something most good carpenters could do, 200 years ago.
That would have been considered a pretty fine skill, though, I would imagine, right? Even back
Yeah.
then?
The tolerances, as Justin suggests, are, way tighter than most carpentry, especially timber framing or framing.
But as a furniture maker,
Mm.
he knows the tight tolerances because you're at the same level.
Level. Mhm.
And you need to understand wood grain and species,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And these are all things that many carpenters have lost owing to how building materials are produced nowadays.
Mike, what would you recommend for his wood species?
I'm not an expert in wood species.
Well,
Uh,
just but the
old
carpenter
white
in you.
pine is what's customary in New England, and I'm sure it varies. I'm
Mm.
guessing it's some other softwood
Where is
in
he
the
again?
Pacific Northwest.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, right.
But the pine we're getting nowadays is not the pine we were getting in the
Mm.
1920s. So it's totally different. Reclaimed wood, I guess I'd go with
Mm.
some old wood.
If you go to the Anderson plant and see what they're making windows out of, it would blow your mind. It seems like every piece of wood, none are longer than
Yeah.
like 5 inches, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's all finger jointed, yeah, or jointed,
Tiny,
edge
tiny
jointed.
little pieces of wood.
That's upsetting to me. I don't know why.
Oh, well, it's pretty resource efficient, Kylie, and
Is
it
it?
makes the pieces that don't warp as readily as something that's got a, defined grain. You have to be, it's all one piece of wood, you have to be very careful about how the grain is oriented and hope that the tree didn't grow on a hillside or all these other things that can turn into warp boards later.
I see.
Jeff, I'm going to let you have the last word on making your own windows.
Well, my comment was going to be that, if at all reasonable, a fixed window,
Mm.
because especially a casement, that's complicated hardware and
Mm.
a lot of it's buried in the frame.
But a casement window. Oh, I just love them. Well, there's nothing like opening and closing a casement window.
Well, I hope you all will tune in for our podcast after show where we talk all about windows. I'm curious to hear about Mike's plan to build his own. And I'm going to share my mixed experience with windows. And Kylie, I'm sure you have thoughts too, because you were just
Seems I
expressing the
do.
joy.
Seems I do. Yeah.
Express the joy that comes out when you talk about casement windows. All right, y'all. Thanks very much for listening. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thanks for joining me and thanks for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Happy building. Keep craft alive. Tune in for the Windows After Show.